The hum of the dojo was a sound embedded in Elias's very bones. For 15 years, the rhythmic squeak of bare feet on polished wood, the sharp exhale of a perfectly executed strike, and the crisp smack of a fist against a focus pad had been the soundtrack to his life. At 32, he was a fourth-degree black belt, a sensei at a respected school in the city, and a man who had built his entire identity on the twin pillars of discipline and control. He taught his students that a black belt was not a weapon, but a symbol of responsibility. It was a lesson he had never truly been forced to test, not in the real world, until the night his younger brother Mateo called. Mateo's voice on the phone was thick with a reckless bravado that Elias knew all too well. He was the opposite of his older brother, impulsive, loud, and constantly chasing the next thrill. Tonight, that thrill had landed him in the kind of trouble that couldn't be solved with a few fast-talking words. He'd been at an exclusive, high-stakes private party, the kind hosted by people for whom the word no was a mere suggestion. Details were fuzzy, but the core message was clear. A massive argument had erupted, and Mateo had ended up getting himself physically thrown out by private security. He was now on the street outside, bruised, humiliated, and demanding that Elias come and be his moral support, his witness to the injustice. Elias sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. He was exhausted after a day of teaching 4 back-to-back classes. The last thing he wanted was to wade into the drama of the city's elite. But the pleading in Mateo's voice, buried beneath the bravado, was something he could never ignore. He was the responsible one. He always had been. He pulled on a dark jacket over his t-shirt, his movements economical and precise, a stark contrast to the chaotic energy he was about to walk into. The dojo had taught him economy of motion, to conserve energy, to assess a situation before acting. As he drove, he mentally prepared himself for a night of de-escalation. He would listen, he would be a calm presence, and he would get his brother home safely. That was the mission. The venue was a converted warehouse, its industrial exterior belying the opulence within. Even from the street, Elias could hear the muffled thump of bass and see the flash of colored lights from the high, reinforced windows. A small crowd of onlookers had gathered on the pavement, kept at a distance by a velvet rope and 2 men built like brick walls. They weren't bouncers in the traditional sense. Their suits were impeccably tailored, their earpieces discreet, and their postures rigid with a military precision that screamed professional close protection. Royal guards for a city's nightlife royalty. And there was Mateo, pacing furiously on the other side of the rope, his shirt untucked and a thin trickle of blood from his lips smeared on his chin. His face lit up with a mixture of relief and renewed anger as he spotted Elias. "Eli! About time! These a-holes think they can just put their hands on people," Mateo shouted, gesturing wildly at the 2 guards. The taller of the 2, a man with a shaved head and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite, didn't even glance in their direction. His eyes remained fixed on a point in the middle distance, his focus entirely on the door he was protecting. The other guard, younger, with a sharper, more eager expression, shifted his weight, his eyes flicking between the 2 brothers. Elias walked up to the rope, placing a steadying hand on Mateo's shoulder. "All right, I'm here. Calm down. What happened?" Mateo launched into a rapid-fire, incoherent explanation involving a spilled drink, and an insult to a girl he was talking to, and a shove that had escalated. Elias listened, nodding, his own body relaxed, his voice low and even. He kept one hand slightly raised, a subtle, non-threatening gesture to the guards, a silent communication that he was here to handle his brother. "It doesn't matter," Elias said quietly, cutting through Mateo's rant. "You're hurt. Let's just go. We'll sort it out tomorrow." But Mateo was beyond reason. The humiliation was a fire in his chest. "No!" I'm not going anywhere until that one apologizes. He jabbed a finger towards the younger guard, the one who had physically ejected him. He put his hands on me first. The younger guard finally broke his stoic silence, a humorless smirk playing on his lips. You were asked to leave, multiple times. You made it physical. End of story, move along. The condescending tone was the spark. Mateo lunged forward, grabbing the velvet rope and yanking it. It was a pathetic, futile gesture. The rope held, but the intent was clear. In the same fluid motion, the younger guard stepped forward, his arm shooting out to push Mateo back, to create separation. His hand connected with Mateo's chest, shoving him hard. Mateo stumbled backward, his feet tangling, and he fell heavily onto the pavement, landing awkwardly on his wrist. He let out a sharp cry of pain. Something snapped inside Elias. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was a deep, visceral, protective instinct. A switch flipped so fast it bypassed every lesson, every ounce of discipline he had spent a lifetime cultivating. All he saw was his little brother on the ground, hurt. The guard was still standing there, his hand now dropping, a look of satisfaction on his face. Elias moved. It wasn't a thought-out decision. It was pure reflex, honed by thousands of hours of practice. His body became a weapon before his mind could catch up. He ducked under the rope with the fluid grace of a cat, closing the 3-foot distance in a single, explosive step. His pivot was perfect, his hips snapping through as he launched a powerful roundhouse kick. His lead leg, the one that had snapped through thousands of practice boards, arced through the air in a perfect horizontal line. His shin connected with the side of the younger guard's face with a sickening, wet thud. The man's head snapped to the side, his body following the momentum in a loose, ragdoll spin before he crumpled to the ground. Unconscious before he even hit the pavement. Time seemed to dilate. Elias saw the spray of saliva and blood from the guard's mouth, saw the man's eyes roll back in his head, saw the shocked expression freeze on Mateo's face from where he sat on the ground. He saw the other guard, the one with the granite face, finally turn. But he didn't lunge. He didn't attack. He just stared. He stared at Elias with an expression that was not anger, not aggression, but something far more unnerving. A cold, decalculating curiosity. He slowly raised a hand to his earpiece and spoke a single, quiet sentence into his cuff. In that one, stupid, uncontrolled moment, the black belt had failed its most important test. The discipline, the control, the years of training, it had all evaporated in a second, replaced by the raw, unfiltered fury of a big brother. And as he stood there, his heart hammering against his ribs, the adrenaline beginning to sour in his stomach, Elias knew with a chilling certainty, though, that the consequences of his actions were only just beginning. The first consequence was a siren. It wailed into existence from a side street, its blue and red lights painting the brickwork of the warehouse in frantic, strobing colors. Within seconds, a police cruiser screeched to a halt, followed by another. The efficiency was startling, as if they had been waiting just around the corner. The granite-faced guard hadn't moved from his post, but his eyes were now fixed on Elias, a silent witness. The scene was frozen. The unconscious guard on the ground, Mateo nursing his wrist, Elias standing with his hands slowly, deliberately, opening and closing at his sides. The officers who approached were brisk and professional. They didn't need much of an explanation. The fallen guard was a clear victim of an assault. Mateo, still buzzing with pain and adrenaline, started to babble, to try and explain, to point fingers. Elias just shook his head. A silent command for his brother to be quiet. He knew how this looked. He knew how this was going to play out. He didn't resist as they turned him around, the cold metal of the handcuffs clicking shut around his wrists. The walk to the squad car was the longest of his life. He could feel the eyes of the onlookers on him, a mix of horror and fascination. He was no longer a sensei, a responsible citizen. He was a man being led away in cuffs, and the night that followed was a blur of fluorescent lights, hard plastic chairs, and repetitive questions. He was processed, photographed, and fingerprinted. They took his black belt, which he had been wearing as a simple cloth belt on his jeans, listing it as an item of evidence. That small action felt more profound than the handcuffs. It was a stripping away of his identity. He was allowed one phone call. He called his dojo's assistant instructor, a steady, loyal woman named Sarah, and his voice flat and devoid of emotion. He told her he wouldn't be in for a while, that there had been an incident and to hold down the fort. He didn't elaborate, and she was too shocked to ask. He was released on his own recognizance in the early hours of the morning, his brother having been questioned and let go. Mateo was waiting for him on the cold stone steps of the police station, his wrist now wrapped in a tensor bandage from a visit to the emergency room. His face was pale, and his earlier bravado completely gone, replaced by a hollow, guilt-ridden shame. "Eli, man, I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. "This is all my fault." Elias looked at his brother. He saw the fear, the regret. He wanted to be angry, to scream at him for his stupidity, for goading him into that situation. But all he felt was a profound, bone-deep weariness. The anger had been spent in that single, catastrophic second. What was left was the fallout. "It's not your fault." "San Mateo," Elias said, his voice hoarse. "I'm the one who kicked him, not you." He didn't say what he was really thinking, that his 15 years of training should have prevented this, that a black belt was supposed to be a shield, not a sword drawn in anger, that the man on the ground was someone's son, someone's partner, and he had put him there. The drive home was silent, the city lights blurring past the window, each one a reminder of the ordered, controlled life he had just shattered. And the next few days were a nightmare of logistics and shame. He had to contact a lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Anya Sharma, who specialized in cases involving martial artists and self-defense claims. Her office was sleek and modern, a world away from the traditional simplicity of his dojo. She listened to his account, her face giving nothing away. "The victim's name is Marcus Thorne," she said, reading from a tablet. 26 years old, former military. I'm now working for a high-end private security firm called Aegis Global. He has a fractured orbital bone and a severe concussion. He's in the hospital." Elias flinched. Fractured orbital bone. He had felt the impact, but hearing the clinical description of the damage he'd caused made it horrifyingly real. The face of the young guard, the one with the sharp, eager expression, was now a mess of broken bone and swelling, all because of him. His employers, Aegis Global, "I are pressing charges aggressively," Ms. Sharma continued, "and the man you did not strike, his partner, is their key witness. He's giving a very clear, damning statement. He's saying you bypassed him, scaled a barrier, and launched an unprovoked, brutal attack on his colleague while he was simply doing his job. He's painting a picture of you as the aggressor." "But my brother," Elias started. "Your brother," Ms. Sharma cut him off gently, "was already outside the venue. He was no longer an active threat. The guard's push, while perhaps unnecessary, could be argued as a reasonable action to prevent him from re-entering. Your response, on the other hand, a single devastating strike to an unsuspecting man's face. That is very difficult to frame as self-defense. The law doesn't see it as a fair fight. It sees it as an assault causing grievous bodily harm.